Cavalry units have seen a massive rise in popularity since the release of Arthur Pendragon, and today I'm going to be doing a cavalry beginner to late game guide, showing you how to use cavalry if you're in pre-KvK 1 all the way up to Season of Conquest. I'll be telling you the best equipment, the best tips, the best tricks I know, and the best commanders to invest in along the way. So if you're interested in being a cav main, maybe you just want to have 1 or 2 cav marches when you hit Season 3, or you're just interested in how cavs are going to travel along in the early game, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now, let's start off with our pre-KvK 1 stuff. For anyone that's watching who hasn't even heard of KvK, this is the section of the video for you. And anyone who is watching and already wants to skip to another part, there will be timestamps in the description. Feel free to go wherever you need in the video. If you're in Season of Conquest, if you're in Season 2, whatever it may be, go to around those points. But starting off with our pre-KvK, generally this is the easiest section. Just pick a cavalry epic commander to work towards. I usually recommend Baibars because he has AoE, his AoE doesn't have a reduction, and it is 5 targets. Baibars is probably the most powerful cav commander for epic commanders, and I'd say a secondary would be someone like Pelagius. Really simple to invest in cavs in the super early game. Baibars is a really strong commander, and is going to be pretty good in that really early stage of the game. Other things to note, if you're super early in the game, one really nice piece of equipment, or like kind of equipment set, is the Vanguard set. This is easily the best green set of equipment in the game. You've got 9% stats out of the green weapon, and you've got 5% stats out of the green legs. Not to mention, you do also have a set bonus. While these are small amounts of stats, in the early game, they're very big compared to other troop types, which might only get 2, 3, 4%. So this amount of stats you're going to get from just 2 green pieces of equipment is amazing. I highly recommend making this set. You can always just dismantle it at a later point, but you're probably going to carry these pieces of equipment up until Season 2 or 3 because they're just that good, especially the halberd. It's a really good weapon for cavs. There isn't really many very amazing cav weapons, up until you get maybe to the Heart of the Saint, which is a purple weapon. Even then, it's argued that the halberd could still be better, because it does have 4% health, while the Heart of the Saint does not. So, the Vanguard set is really good to work towards in that early game, and it's going to help you quite a bit. As for civilization, simply, I just picked no cav civilization at the start. There's no point picking one. I'd probably still just go with China to get the building speed and the action point recovery, or go with Britain to get Boudica, so you can actually use her bonuses in terms of her PvE benefits. The other option for you, if you are a cav main, could be you do get Arabia to get the free sculptures on Baibars, and then once you hit, I think it's City Hall 8, and you get that civilization swap, you swap to China or Britain. But keep in mind, it means you're going to have to somewhere get another civilization swap, so you can swap from Britain or China to a more combat civilization, like the Ottoman Empire or Byzantium if you are a cav main, because once you hit KvK 1, you're going to want to switch your civilization to something that's going to give you a bit of an open field advantage. Moving on to KvK 1, this is where you're probably getting more into the game at this point. You're becoming a bit of a stronger player. Your account's probably at like 7 to 8 million power, maybe even more, if you know what you're doing especially. This is where you get to decide if you're going to buy Minamoto. Free-to-play is obviously, buying is not in the stuff you do, so you're not going to be getting Minamoto. But if you're willing to spend the money, Minamoto is a really good choice. Now, unlike most cav commanders, you can't cav swap Minamoto, you can't commander swap Minamoto, sorry, which can be a problem. But you do get access to him for, I think it's around $300 US, which is extremely cheap for a legendary commander. And Minamoto is an absolute beast in KvK 1 and KvK 2, and is going to be an absolute carry if you do want to get him. If you get Minamoto, it's super easy to be a cav main. You literally just run Minamoto with probably Baibars even, and you're going to have a very amazing march. You're going to pretty much demolish absolutely everything that comes your way. So Minamoto, really good pickup if you're willing to spend the money. You can either get him super early game, but most people don't have access to him super early game because your VIP level is not high enough, which is why I'm saying you're looking more towards a KvK 1 point where you can at least get some skills on him. Even a 5-5, so the first 2 skills maxed, 1-1 Minamoto is pretty good. I mean, he's not going to be game breaking, but he'll be usable, especially in the start of KvK 1. As you get towards the end, when people start to expertise their Richards, their YSGs, their Martels, their Pyruses, those commanders will start to do a lot of damage to Minamoto, and you'll find that he's going to become weaker. But in the early stages, if you want to spend $30, $40 to get that slightly stronger Minamoto, he is going to be very good for you. So Minamoto in the early KvK, especially KvK 1, is amazing. If you can get him in the early game as well, he is going to be really good. Other than that, for KvK1, Cavs don't really have much. You've got Cao Cao if you are willing to invest gold heads into him. While I don't recommend it because there are some stronger commanders which will come up very soon, if you want to invest gold heads into Cao Cao for KvK1, it's not a travesty because you can commander swap him at a later point, and he is also pretty good for PvE, which is alright in the early game. So Cao Cao, while I'm personally not a fan of putting gold heads in him, and I think Cavs have better options, he isn't the worst if you want to get a lot of KvK1 value, if you feel like you like KvK1 the most, or you really want to experience it. Put a couple of gold heads in him. You can commander swap him later. You're only ever going to invest in 2 Cav commanders. That's my main rule for most players. You want to try work to an expertise, I'd say, if you're going to put gold heads into Cao Cao, though, because you'll be able to swap him. So, more gold heads you put in, the better. If you're willing to spend money on him, that's also a pretty okay option. So, if you're willing to go into the daily special offer and you're willing to actually buy Cao Cao out of these commanders, I think that is not the worst purchase for Cav mains, considering you don't really have any other option besides Minamoto. So if you want to buy Cao Cao sculptures, especially because he is swappable, you can swap him with any commander once you hit Season 3 and beyond, Cao Cao is a pretty good option, and I wouldn't say he is that bad for most accounts. Other than that, if you don't want to get any of the early game legendary commanders for Cavalry, there are still the option of the epics. And while the epic commanders for Cavs are not the most OP, Baibars should hold his own in KvK1, and Pelagius would be a good secondary or primary in my opinion. So I'd probably go actually with Baibars primary just because he has a conquering and skill tree, Pelagius secondary because he has a garrison tree and it's not as good. Granted, we don't really love Pelagius' skills, but he could be manageable to use in KvK1. I mean, he's not going to be ridiculous, but he's usable. Other option would be Belisarius if you want a bit more mobility, if you want a bit more march speed, but you're going to have much lower damage. So keep that in mind. It's okay to run either Belisarius or Baibars in KvK1 or a Pelagius. Any 3 of those commanders together will work. In my opinion, though, you must have a Baibars. And if you want, you can invest in Cao Cao, and if you want to spend money, you can definitely pick up Minamoto. As for equipment in KvK1, you want to start working towards some of the epic pieces for Cavs. I still think stick with the Vanguard of the Halberd and also the Vanguard Greaves. Get these special talented, get them as strong as you can get them to that point, and then just keep them probably until KvK 2 or 3. Other than that, you're just going to work on a few epic pieces. There is the epic Abyssal Visage. This is not the most amazing piece of equipment, in my opinion. You probably don't want to get that till towards the end. Some of the things that you could get if you are a Cav main, you can definitely go and get something like the Dark Lord's Blessing. This is a pretty solid piece of equipment. It's available in the Tavern VIP shop, and you can earn it from Barbarian Keeps and also from the Barbarian Chieftain, which I don't really know where you'd fight him, but I think he's in the Barbarian Keeps or Barbarian Strongholds. Whatever it may be, you can get Dark Lord's Blessing. That's not a very horrible piece of Cav equipment. You can also get access to a pair of gloves if I can find it. There it is. Windswept braces are not too bad for Cavs because they do give you Cav health, but if you want more stats, you can go and you can get the Isset Sufferance. Now, this is a bit of a more annoying one to get. To my knowledge, it's only available in the Tavern chest, or occasionally we'll get it with Osiris League. So Isset Sufferance is a bit hard to get, but if you do have access to it, it is a nice piece of Cav equipment you can use in the early game. Last thing you can look at is the boots for Cavs. I'm pretty sure that Cloud Racers, while they're not the best, are usable, or again, you can pick up Windswept boots. So you can kind of just slot in the Windswept stuff if you want over the equipment that you can't use. Some stuff here isn't the most amazing, like Windswept Warhelm is only March speed, and is only Cav attack, and you might as well get Abyssal Visage. But early game Cav gear, it's pretty simple. Use Vanguard set and then just either put in Windswept or whatever gear you can find that is epic or blue that's going to give you some good amount of stats. So Cavs, pretty simple gear, especially in KvK1. If you want to work towards any legendary fragments, I highly recommend the Navarre's Control. It's a really, really good piece for Cavs. It's relatively cheap as well compared to some other legendary equipment pieces because it is in your glove slot. So Navarre's Control, really good to try and get the blueprint for that as soon as you can. Maybe it's going to show up in the Lucerne Scroll, maybe you get it out of the Tavern, or you see an event where you can earn a couple of prints for it. Just try work towards Navarre's Control. It is a good option. And then there's also stuff like the other Cav legs. So for example, the Hellish Wasteland legs, while these are not the best, they do give you some attack. but to my knowledge, I think the boots are very good as well with 7.5% health. So Cav gear is relatively good. Working towards anything that's going to give you health on the legendary pieces is, in my opinion, a pretty good idea. As for the Cavalry civilization, in KvK 1, I recommend either Byzantium or the Ottoman Empire. Either one is going to be pretty nice. I'd say Byzantium for the special unit. You also get extra hospital capacity, which in the early KvK can be pretty nice if you have smaller hospitals. So Byzantium or Ottoman Empire are both really good options. Ottomans are probably slightly worse because you don't have the special unit, but I could see it being debated that the march speed and the skill damage does give you a big enough difference for it to be worth it. So Ottomans or Byzantium, in my opinion, are the two best Cav civilizations you can pick at that really early stage in the game. Now, moving on to Season 2, this is where we get access to Saladin and Genghis Khan. Now, if you didn't invest in any Cav commanders legendary up until this point, you'll just pick up both of them. Saladin or Khan Saladin is a very good march, and to my knowledge, in KvK 2, and while Khan sucks in KvK 3 and Saladin sucks in KvK 3, you do get the option to commander swap them nowadays. So Genghis Khan with Saladin is a super amazing march. If you already have a Cao Cao, or you don't want to get a Genghis Khan for whatever reason, or you can't get him because I think he's in the MGE, you can, of course, decide to just use a Saladin and skip using a Cao Cao, or just use a Baibars with him. So if you have a Cao Cao, you can do Saladin Cao Cao. If you have a Minamoto, you can do Mina Saladin. If you have a Baibars, you can do Saladin Baibars. They're all really solid options. Saladin will work with any Cav commander up until this point. I don't think there's a single Cav commander in the game up until Season 2 who doesn't really work with Saladin, because Saladin's got a very generic, high damage and strong kit. So Saladin, he'll work very well in KvK 2, is going to be a must grab in my opinion, especially if you don't already have a Cao Cao or a Minamoto. So if you don't get a Saladin, take him up to expertise and you're not going to be disappointed. You can also get him to 5-5-5-1 if you do want to save the gold heads, but there is no point because the way the commander swap works, it's going to take the exact amount of levels you've given that commander and put them in the exact same slots on the other commander. So Saladin, probably just take him towards the expertise or as close as you can get, and run him with a Khan if you have access to the MGE, or run him with a Cao Cao / a Minamoto or Baibars if you don't. So Saladin, really amazing choice, and you're going to be able to use him very well in KvK 2. As for the equipment, you're just going to start working towards a legendary set. At this point, you should probably have a full epic set that's fairly strong. I would just try and get Navarre's control, since it's quite a big upgrade over the windswept braces or the Isset suffrages. So either one of those, I think Navarre's control is a very good idea to work towards, and probably the cavalry boots. Now at this point, I think the other best boots would have been like windswept boots, which are not the most amazing, so you might as well work towards getting the Hellish Wasteland boots. They're going to give you 7.5% health, and they're going to be very solid. Other than that, Cavalry also do have a pretty good chest plate to my knowledge. Again, another 11% health, so you can also work towards that if you do want, and you want to replace the Cav chest plate. But keep in mind, the chest plate is the most expensive out of the, or one of the more expensive equipment pieces out of all the 6. I do recommend getting gloves and boots first, considering that for Cavs, the gloves and boots are also very, very powerful, and they are also still extremely cheap compared to normal legendary equipment. So getting those two pieces is going to help you out a lot. Now, moving on to Season 3. This is where we get access to all the amazing legendary commanders who are going to be completely meta, and this is where you get to pick the commanders you are going to swap. Now, if you invest in Minamoto, you don't get to have a swap on him. He is just, I think, a permanent commander that you cannot swap. But if you didn't invest in Minamoto, you do now get the chance to swap any of your other commanders. If you have a Cao Cao, a Saladin, if you have a Khan, all those Cavs can be swapped, and this is where you get to pick the strongest commanders you can get. And at this point, I recommend just getting an Arthur Pendragon and a Nevsky. They're going to be very solid. Nevsky with Arthur, very safe route to go, especially if you're very new to the game. They're very powerful. They're going to do tons of damage. Arthur's AoE is going to be a beast, and Nevsky is relatively tanky. He's got a pretty good debuff that's going to get better the more marches you build, and is going to be pretty good with Arthur. It's a no-frills march. It's a low-risk march on the open field, and it's going to give you some pretty high reward. Another option, if you don't want to get Nevsky for whatever reason, is you can do Hao Che Bing with a Arthur Pendragon, but regardless of who you're picking, I definitely recommend getting Arthur. Some no-nos in the commander swap: I wouldn't get Attila or Takeda. A lot of people thought he'd be good with Arthur. He's not. I wouldn't get William. I wouldn't get Zhang Yu. I wouldn't get Chandragupta. I wouldn't get Bertrand. Pretty much any of the non-meta-ish commanders, the commanders I'm clicking on right now, I just wouldn't invest in them. Most of these commanders, especially Belisarius, are super niche. You need a weird murder ball, you need to have a lot of cav marches. It's just not something realistically an early game player who's just hit Season 3 is going to have access to. So in my opinion, swap your marches to a Nevsky and an Arthur Pendragon, and you're going to be in a really, really good situation for Season 3. If you have spare gold heads, I'd begin working on a second march. It could be another troop type if that's what you want, or it could just be continuing to work on cavalry, which in that case, I'd get a Hao Bing and a Joan, and I'd run them together. So working on getting Joan's first skill and her fourth skill at least maxed, and Hao Bing, I'd work towards getting him on an expertise level. They're going to be a very strong march, and if you do have spare gold heads, you'll be able to run a Nevsky with an Arthur Pendragon, which is absolutely meta, and a Hao Bing with a Joan Prime, which is also going to be very meta. So that is, in my opinion, the best way to work your Season 3 into Season of Conquest marches. So now that we've hit Season 3, I'm pretty sure we can say confidently you've got access to Navarre's Control, really, really good piece of equipment, and hopefully you've also been able to get access to the Boots of the Hellish Wasteland. At this point, you pretty much just finish off a similar set to the Hellish Wasteland set. You go and you get the Hellish Wasteland chestplate. This is going to give you another solid 3% troop health. You're going to go and save your epic head. I probably wouldn't build the Hellish Wasteland helmet because you can get Pride of the Khan and it's going to be slightly better. I wouldn't make the cavalry weapon. I'm kind of just winging it here with the cav stuff because I'm not the most cavalry equipment inclined, but in my opinion, I'd probably skip the cav weapon, get the Sacred Domain. Again, it is 5% more stats if you just wait until you hit Season of Conquest, and now they are the same cost. So Khans, Pride of the Khan, Sacred Domain, you've got the Chest of the Hellish Wasteland, you've got Navarre's Control, Boots of the Hellish Wasteland, and the last thing you're going to get is probably the Ash of the Dawn. It's going to give you slightly more stats than you would get out of the Tassets of the Hellish Wasteland, considering we're not going for the 4-piece set bonus. If you want to do 4-piece set bonus, you can do Tassets of the Hellish Wasteland, Boots of the Hellish Wasteland, Chestplate of the Hellish Wasteland, and then the Cavalry Weapon, which is the Lance of the Hellish Wasteland, and then you'll just do the Cavalry Helmet, Pride of the Khan, with a Navarre's Control, and you'll be able to get the 4-piece set bonus, which will give you a nice 3% counter-attack damage. While it's not the most overpowered, it is a nice little amount of stats, and in my opinion, it can be justifiable to get that over going for 2 KvK pieces and 2 non-set pieces. So that's up to you at that point, and that's pretty much the equipment set you should be working towards. So that is it for the Cavalry Guide. We started off all the way at Pre-Season 1, and we moved our way all the way up to Season 3 or Season of Conquest. We've looked at every single commander pairing you should be able to use, we've given a step-by-step equipment guide, and we've gone over some civilization and other tips to do if you're a cavalry player. So if you are a cavalry main, or you want to be a cavalry main, and you found today's video helpful, useful, interesting, whatever it may be, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a really, really small thing that helps me out a ton, and you can always unsubscribe if you don't enjoy the content. So if you want to be able to support this channel, if you found the video helpful, interesting, whatever it may be, and you want to see more cav guides, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. It's much appreciated, and other than that, I just want to say I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.